Daniel had always considered himself a logical man. He believed in cause and effect, in evidence, in things he could touch and measure. And yet, as he turned the key to his new apartment that autumn evening, a chill ran down his spine that no amount of reason could explain. The apartment smelled faintly of mildew, but that wasn't unusual for a building this old. It had the creak of old wood beneath every step, the sigh of iron pipes carrying water somewhere beyond the walls. But something else lingered, a quiet expectation, as though the apartment were waiting for him to do something, though he didn't yet know what. He unpacked quickly, eager to establish normalcy, to remind himself that this was just another move, another room in a long string of rooms he had occupied over the years. By the time night fell, Daniel was exhausted, yet sleep refused him. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. At 2:51 a.m., a faint scratching sound began somewhere behind the wall. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause. Almost rhythmic, almost deliberate. He pressed his ear to the wall. Silence. When he turned off the light and returned to bed, the scratching started again. Closer now, almost like someone was dragging something along the floorboards inside the wall. He froze, unable to breathe, unwilling to move. It ended as suddenly as it began. The next night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., the footsteps arrived, slow, precise, pacing the hallway outside his door. Daniel pressed his eye to the peephole. Nothing. The hall was empty. Then a door creaked across the hall. Apartment 6B. He couldn't explain why the number stuck in his mind. The brass digits were tarnished, hanging slightly loose, yet someone lived there. Someone who paced the halls at 3:03 every night. On the third night he waited by the door. The footsteps came. They stopped just outside. He pressed his eye to the peephole and saw it, a shadow, long and distorted. In the briefest moment it seemed to stare right back at him. A whisper slid under the door. "We're watching." A slip of paper followed. "Don't trust what you see." Daniel laughed it off the next morning. A prank. An overactive imagination. But the note, the whisper, the shadow, they lingered in his mind. By the fourth night, the disturbances escalated. The scratching was louder. The whispers were clearer. And the hallway outside apartment 6B wasn't empty. Figures moved in the shadows, just at the edge of his vision. He tried to leave the apartment, to ignore it, to rationalize everything. But logic faltered as events grew stranger. Objects moved on their own. Keys disappeared from the kitchen counter, only to appear in his bathroom sink. Books were stacked differently than he left them. Every mirror reflected a faint figure behind him. Never fully visible, never static, always just there. Then came the dreams. He dreamed he was walking down a hallway that stretched impossibly long, walls bleeding shadows. The number 6 repeated endlessly on every door. The whispering followed him. He tried to scream, but no sound came. He tried to run, but his legs failed. And always at the end of the hall, the door to 6B waited, beckoning. He began to lose track of days. Insomnia consumed him. Meals became secondary. Work was a fog he barely navigated. Friends called, but he barely answered. The apartment 6B, and the whispers became his entire world. Curiosity overcame fear one night. He stepped into the hallway, his pulse hammering, and approached apartment 6B. The door looked solid, but as he reached for the handle, a cold sensation ran up his arm. He froze. Then, the handle turned itself. Inside was his own apartment. Everything identical. Furniture, belongings, the faint smell of mildew. And a figure, himself, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at him. Daniel staggered back, tripping over the threshold. The door slammed. He tried to scream, but only a whisper emerged. "It's your turn." Days blurred into nights. Daniel could no longer tell which apartment was real. He confronted friends, but they looked at him blankly, or insisted he had been living alone. A police check confirmed it. He had been the sole tenant of this building for months, maybe years. The notes, the whispers, the figure in apartment 6B. They left no trace, except in his memory. And yet, the disturbances continued. Daniel's reflection in the mirror became another torment. It did not mimic him. It acted independently, smiling when he frowned, tilting its head when he moved straight. Once he reached out to touch it and felt the glass vibrate under his fingers like a pulse. The whispers turned personal. Names, events he had no memory of, secrets only he would know. And then the figure appeared in his dreams, speaking to him directly. "You belong here." He tried to leave the building. Every door he opened led him back to the lobby of apartment 6B. The stairwell twisted impossibly, corridors duplicated themselves, and the elevator no longer functioned normally. At 3:03 a.m., it moved on its own, stopping on non-existent floors, opening doors to rooms he had never entered. One night he found a diary in apartment 6B. Its pages were blank except for one sentence repeated over and over. "The subject is ready. The subject is ready. The subject is ready." Daniel screamed, but the scream echoed back at him from the walls, distorted and merged with the whispers. At this point, the terror became total. The building itself seemed alive, breathing, aware. He was trapped in a maze of his own mind. The line between reality and hallucination collapsed entirely. He saw himself in corners where he shouldn't exist. He heard conversations he had never had. The shadowy figure of himself across the hall was now everywhere. Every reflection, every window, every glass surface. Finally, Daniel confronted the ultimate truth. The building was not merely a residence, it was an experiment. Every oddity, the shifting floors, the whispers, the non-existent apartment 6B was designed to destabilize him psychologically. The building's operators observed his every move, but the most horrifying part was not that he was being watched. It was that the operators were irrelevant. The terror came from himself. He was the subject, trapped in a loop of his own fractured psyche. The neighbor who never slept, the whispers at 3:03, the reflection smiling independently. These were manifestations of his mind, as attempt to preserve sanity while also erasing it. Every door, every shadow, every note was a projection of his fear, crafted to make him question everything. By the final night, Daniel no longer attempted escape. He wandered the hallways endlessly, following footsteps that were never there, opening doors to apartments that were never built, reading notes that he had written to himself. In a final, shattered moment of clarity, he looked into a mirror in apartment 6B. And there he saw him, smiling, calm, watching. Not a reflection, not a ghost. Himself. The words whispered through his mind without sound. "Your turn to sleep." Daniel understood then. The figure he feared, the building he couldn't escape, the whispers, the notes, they had all been preparing him for this moment, to surrender, to vanish into the endless loop of apartment 6B. He screamed one last time, and the mirror went black. The building remained, the lights flickered, the clocks ticked, endlessly precise. And somewhere, far beyond, another new tenant turned the key to the last apartment, unaware that 3:03 a.m. would come again, and the game would continue.